Welcome to the latest edition of Innovate and Inspire. Today we have an insightful conversation with the multi-talented Davis Deen, a beacon of creativity and healing in trauma-informed therapy and the arts. With expertise spanning over 2 decades, Davis is a seasoned storyteller and writer, an experienced event coordinator, a master of ceremonies, and a certified trauma counselor specialising in crisis, trauma, and PTSD. His passion for the Caribbean culture and the transformative power of storytelling shines through his work, making him a true pioneer in using creativity for healing and social change. So join us as we delve into his fascinating journey and the intersection of mental health, art, and community engagement. Welcome, Davis.
Thank you, Edwin. Thanks a lot for having me on the program.
Great having you here with us today. I guess where I should start should be, well, you're a storyteller, you're a poet, you're a writer, you're an MC, you're a radio host, you're a mental health trauma specialist, and those are just some of the many roles that you have. So my first question to you is, who exactly are you?
But Edwin, I think that's the multi-million question we all sort of ask ourselves, right? Who am I? And what am I doing? What's my existence about? And maybe that's where I started out the journey when I was a teenager. Who I am, who am I, and that stage of my life formed the very person you see sitting here having this interview. Um, because I used to do quite a lot, and I've come from that background in Trinidad where it was quite tough growing up as a teenager. And, I think the multidimensional description you made about me and the things I do perhaps are the things that saved me as a teenager from going in the opposite direction to what is good or right or nice, I suppose. And yeah.
Okay, I want to come back to your youth and this multidimensional um, element. But you've mentioned that you grew up in Trinidad, born and bred. And can you tell us a little bit about your upbringing in Trinidad and how that upbringing has influenced your decision? I know you studied theology and behavioral science. How that upbringing influenced your pursuit of a career in mental health and trauma therapy here in the UK.
And the thing about growing up is that we experience quite a lot of trauma. In my experience, with my father passing away at the age of 8, I was 8 years old, around that age, 7 going on 8, when he died, not understanding what was happening at the time, but certainly losing that father figure role in my life and in the family's life. And then, you know, looked after by my grandparents, my grandmothers, and my mother. So, matriarch ruled the den, so to speak. And growing up was quite tough when my father died. I mean, I have memories right back until the age of 2, my grandmother say, but up until the time he passed away, it was nice. Life was okay, kind of. Um, but it was quite tough after that. And I think that formed some of my getting into mental health based on some of my own experiences of poverty, but also that, lack of, who do you go to? You have your mothers to go to if there was a problem, but you climb on top of a plum tree. Or I find myself going on top of the highest coconut tree just to get away from the people, the earth, the things, the fresh air. I found myself doing all those different kind of things to find a bit of space, a bit of peace. And and I think the push and thrust to go into theology and behavioral science was an amalgamation of experiences growing up. without some form of, you know, I suppose, understanding from other people about what sadness and how to manage grief or how to manage those things effectively. And so parents did what they did, grandparents did what they did. You know, you had to carry on doing what you do. But so I suppose some of that forms that.
Okay, so would you say that, you know, your the matriarchs in your family obviously
Hmm.
played a major role in your upgrade in your upbringing and shaping you into becoming who you are today? Were there other role models, whether it's school or elsewhere, that shaped you into becoming a very accomplished storyteller, I might add, and actor? And you mentioned early in one of your early questions that it's those sort of things, those role models that actually saved you from going down the wrong path, as it were, um, and
Hmm.
pointed you in the direction to helping others to overcome trauma and negativities. Can you expand a little bit on that for me, please?
Yeah, and I think recognizing trauma in my own life without recognizing what the trauma symptoms were plunged me into doing things in the arts, actually using a focus into storytelling when I was in school. So I had role models who were my teachers, my art teacher, Al Ramsawak, James Basin, who was another prolific business lecturer in my secondary years, and a couple other people who were very influential as male role models. And also it gave me an opportunity to exert some of my energy. And interestingly, when I reflect on it now, I realize what I was doing was actually keeping a focus outside of traumatic situations, i.e., growing up, i.e., poverty, in my home. You know, when I was growing up, a lot of that energy was pushed into that. Role models in storytelling were literally the people I mentioned in my book, Tales of Survival. Papi, we had a Papi who was of African origin in the Caribbean and Indian origin in the Caribbean. Two Papis, two storytellers, two very prolific. And you would just lose yourself into the stories, into their story, into their world. And so from a very early age, we grew up around that thing. You know, grandmothers telling us stories of the Bible stories, of the Quran stories, of the, you know, the Hindu Bible stories as well, because we grew up in that multicultural environment. So I think not only did my grandmothers and mother and some male role models, teachers, as well as people in the village, in the community, shaped some of that, but I also think, you know, my own traumas that I experienced that we don't talk about as a lot of as Caribbean people, but also as men, you know, was quite prolific in pushing me into what I was also doing, and in the church as well. I found that good role
Okay,
models.
okay, great. Um, so you came to the UK in the 80s, um, and you began working in this intense area of mental health. Um, for you, what are some of the most rewarding outcomes that you've experienced in your 20 plus years of therapy work? And how have these experiences contributed to your, I guess, the enthusiasm, the joy that you feel in seeing others like yourself who achieve a level of freedom from their trauma and negativity as a result of what you shared with them? Can you just share with us some experiences, some outcomes that you've had that you can share?
Yeah, I mean, I think from the if I work my way back and come up, one of the things that I experienced was working with young people and students for a while, one of my managerial roles. And it was at a time when I was sort of really pushing myself, really motivated back in the sort of 99, 2000, 2001. And I spent a number of years working as a practice development facilitator, managing over 120 sites with students, clinicians. That gave me a lot of joy and insight into people. It was also in mental health, and really it was developing uh, clinical areas for students of all backgrounds: mental health, general nursing, art, art therapists, psychology. But I also specifically was working with mental health nurses coming across from Ghana and other areas of the world. I was instrumental in helping a few of them find work and secure work, and also take away some of them from illegal working where people were exploiting some of their services, keeping their passports. I think that's back early in the days. But where so that's sort of around mental health issues for from cultural perspectives, also working in therapy since then. um, especially working in trauma and PTSD. I find myself having some lived experiences and being able, because of my education in mental health and qualifications, to be able to help people a little bit more. So some of the experiences I have on with people both in the military and in the private and public sectors, I can reflect on and say I have been more effective based on my experiences growing up in Trinidad and coming into the UK, using that experience in my practice as well.
What I find really interesting about your story, Davis, and the work that you do is this. Um, I want to say collaboration, but this working or the using of your skill as a storyteller and your energetic personality, I'd say, as a master of ceremonies on stage, how those talents contribute to helping you work with um, people experiencing trauma, especially children and young people. How how those skills and those abilities actually help you in your role there, because for most of us as lay people, we think trauma and we think, whoa, heavy, 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 whoa, and you've got to really have a mindset for that. And, but it's like you will use something as enjoyable as storytelling, as exciting as storytelling to help. Can you just share that
Yeah, and I think
relationship?
and your earlier questions is actually you'd find this makes more sense, because this is exactly what I find when I reflect, Edwin, is
Mm,
as a teenager I sort of plunged myself into it, pushed myself into achieving, being, I mean, as a teenager, the best storyteller, the best actor on stage, the best prose writer or speaker. I had a loud voice. I was always involved in that sort of thing. So that energy, I was able to push it into the arts, and then find myself, as I reflect on it, as you're asking me, in that yin and yang, that sort of, sometimes I'm serious and then sometimes I'm on the stage and I'm having a good time. So I use the arts, the creativity, the storytelling, the MC work, the work that I did with the BBC plus work on the stage as an outlet to help me
mm,
balance not only my own traumatizations, but
mm.
also that which I find working with other people. So therein lies a level of my resilience, I think, over the years. And I've been able to keep a registration from 1996 right up to now and be in mental health nursing in all different formats since then, nonstop. So I think it helps me to balance the books, so to speak. It
Yeah,
gives me motivation. Each facet of what I do gives me motivation for the other facet. The trauma work gives me an impetus for storytelling and story writing, and the storytelling and the public entertainment gives me an understanding in the trauma work.
I know from my experience as a musician, um, how powerful an art form like music um, plays within, um, the easing of mental trauma. Just as one example, how vital do you think it is for the arts to play an integral role in this massive area of mental health trauma?
I mean, I'm 100% sold in the idea that music is a therapy and is therapy, and there's music therapy. I have colleagues who are music therapists, but music as therapy as well. Just people could sit in, even if it's not music therapy directly,
Mm.
you're using music as a therapy. Um, just sitting in music, doing what you do with a choir, people singing in groups, people singing on their own, people just in the street, people just vibes in, gives your brain a rest and a relaxation from the tremendous, overwhelming weight of something that either you experience as distressing. Yeah, and if we just use the pandemic as an example, because it's just near us, we're 4 years from it, 2 or 3 years from it. You just use that as an example. Your brain, the capacity, overwhelmingly upsetting situations where death, where sickness, where illness was concerned. We've lost so many people. Having a break from that is what we're really doing in trauma therapy, is what we really want. So the arts as a form of that focus, at a diversion where your working memory and your brain is caught up with all of the daily things, like it's serious, it's upsetting, it's distressing. Music like you do, choir like you do, entertainment, arts, design, all of those good things help your brain to feel relaxed, calm. It's almost like getting a break, or building a bubble or a zorb. You're putting your brain in that. You're protecting it a little bit by doing some of those things, consciously or unconsciously. So I think it's really important, and I think that's the way I feel. So I'm describing how I feel when I do my storytelling, when I absorb myself in a story. I make up characters, or I go from Papi, what Papi used to say, how he said it. My brain is kind of not thinking about the upsetting things, and it's doing that good thing where it's creating, and giving you time to rest and relax, if you see what I mean, from it,
Yeah.
so that when you go back to it, you can focus on solving issues. I don't know if that makes sense. I hope so.
Yeah. It's really, really fascinating stuff. It's a really interesting area. Um, you've given us a little glimpse, and you touched upon the fact that you're also, on top of everything else, a published author. And he says, what motivated you to publish your book, Tales of Survival, which actually combines poems and stories from your upbringing? Um, uh, and how do these narratives found in your work, you know, connect with your work as a therapist and a storyteller? Yeah.
So Tales of Survival came about because uh, my grandmothers, who were ill right up until 2014, then they passed away, both of them in their 90s, late 90s, I must admit. Really, really long life. And they were really close to me. I felt very close to my grandparents, my grandmothers especially, because I didn't, you know grew up without grandfathers. As I said, when my father died, he was the sort of last leader, man, role model, if you like, male role model in my life, in my family's life, pardon me. And it was an amalgamation of stories that I heard from them, that I grew up with, that I heard in the village, and I transformed it into something from my point of view. So it was real stories, not just folklore stories about Anansi, but certainly from my point of view, the way in which Anansi was told, or stories about the Laja Bless, or the Jombi, that is similar to the Gopi,
Yeah.
Dopi, sorry, in Jamaica. And the poems reflected some real experiences about the bat, about bat flying around inside their house. And some people miss totally the fact that our house was so open that bats could fly in at any time. Lizards, insects, cockroaches. It's unreal, Edwin, and you have to grapple with that whole thing without having a window in your kitchen. But that's another story. So Tales of Survival was about that amalgamation that I wanted to put out there about my grandmothers, how they survived as women in the Caribbean, and they were strong enough to from being Muslim and Hindu to convert to Christianity. And it's not so much about the religion, but their strength as women, Indian women as well, in a
Mm.
mixed community, in a diverse community, to embrace changes back in the 50s and 60s in the Caribbean wasn't easy and tough. So it was about that as well. And, it was that amalgamation that I found helps me now, because I'm always thinking, actually, this tale of survival is in everybody's experience. How do we survive and navigate, especially 2024 post pandemic, with everything that's happening in society and around us in the world? Survival is key. How do you survive? What are the tools for survival? And how do you use your past, your history, your legacy to survive today and move on tomorrow? So it informs some of that in my life and my development, really.
Cool. I'm getting from what you're saying that, you know, um, the tales of survival is as much about your story of survival as it is about everybody else's story of survival that you're trying to help. And all of us have got a
Yeah,
story of survival, a tale of survival. Maybe we just haven't told it yet. Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah. Um,
Absolutely. And maybe you haven't said it as a tale of your survival, but it is. How do you survive? How have you, what tools have you used to help you survive so far?
mm,
And is it relevant going forward post 2024? Do you need to adapt it? Do you need to review it? Do you need to to sharpen it up,
yeah.
you know, so to speak?
Cool.
But absolutely right, Edwin. I like that perspective as well.
All right. Cool. Um, I want to ask you one last question because I know that you're working on two other books. um, is there any? Is there any? Are there any secrets that you can share with us about the two books and how you see those two books um, furthering your impact on helping others overcome trauma? Anything you can share
Well,
with the audience?
the secret I will share is going to be understood by one person, and his name is James Law, and he's an author friend of mine who was well published back in 2014-15, um, nationally, internationally, with a trilogy. First book um, about submariners and a female investigator, and he said something to me back then about Caribbean stories and novels. So one is a novel that I
Okay.
have been exploring since he gave me those ideas in 2015 when he published his books, James Law, J.S. Law, and also another combination of poems and stories over the years that I've been working on. And also, I have to say, Edwin, about my children, because they're 7 years old, twins, boy and girl, Sukia and Elias. Sukia named after my grandmother. And and she's been writing poems and stories. Interestingly, she's very she likes to sing, she likes to act, she likes to dance. They both do acting drama in school, but she's very creative in writing stuff, a bit like me, and exploring lots of different ideas. So I'm using some of her ideas to formulate some of the writing into one book, and then I'm working on Caribbean, a character in Caribbean life as a novel as well.
Hey,
It's a bit of a crime novel.
all right. We await your books with bated breath, and
Yeah.
we could spend another hour discussing your fascinating and diverse career, Davis. But I just want to thank you for taking the time out of your
Oh,
busy schedule to be with us today and for sharing just a piece of your inspiring
yeah.
journey. I want to thank our audience for joining us today, and we look forward to you joining us again on Innovate and Inspire, stories of vision and impact. So thank you and goodbye.